You're listening to Mark of the Maker. Hey everybody, I'm Mark Steiner and you're listening to Mark of the Maker, and this is episode 41 of our show. This time we're going to talk about common knife myths. So we called it Knife Mythbusters as sort of the working title of the show, but we'll get into that in just a couple minutes. Sean Kendrick wasn't able to join us for this one. We got apparently some crazy flu stuff going on down his way, and he wasn't able to join us for this recording, but we do have Mr. Tom Crine here.
Hey guys, how's it going?
And as usual, we have Mr. Michael Birch.
Hey everybody.
When do you guys want to take a swing at this Knife Mythbusters and what we're going to try to talk about as we go through this thing?
Sure. It's there's a lot of common sort of wives' tales out there, and as big as the knife community has gotten, there's just a lot of these myths being perpetuated. So we kind of wanted to cover a few of those and tell you which ones are a little bit false in our opinions.
I was going to say, some of this is going to get into the realm of opinion for sure, but some of it's just flat wrong, right? So we'll talk about it.
So, like Mythbusters, not all of these are actually going to be completely wrong. Some of them are be partially wrong, right? There's some some of it is true, some of it's false, some of it's not quite either or.
There you go.
So, Yeah, I think this should be a fun episode, kind of a Mythbuster type thing.
One thing's for sure, it's going to drive some conversation, which will be interesting.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a lot of opinions.
Yeah.
I think we ought to throw out a couple myths ourselves just to get people pissed off and get the conversation flowing.
Perpetuate our own myths, start them fresh.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. And we got TKI just around the corner. I don't know if this episode's going to make it out before TKI, but you guys are scrambling, right? Lots going on.
Oh, yeah.
Man, I'm terrified.
Terrified?
Busy time.
Well, I look around and like Sean's had his knives done for weeks and everybody's posting up knives that are done. And I look at what Birch is building and it's just kind of epic. And
thanks.
I seriously just started Friday and I've got parts cut out and that's it. So it's been a really busy time for me for the last 4 months. And it seems like it's getting busier. And I feel like the last few months I've been behind the 8 ball and I'm finally starting to get caught up on some of this stuff. But then the shows, every time I feel like I'm, there's light at the end of the tunnel, there's a show and it ends up being a train.
Right. Coming at you fast.
Oh man. So
be a great time for that train to come through and give us a nice sound effect.
Right. That would be sweet.
Exactly.
The good thing about you though, is you're at least making knives before the show, so you're making money before the show. I haven't made any, sold anything in a while.
Yeah.
I've just been like doing this and that's it.
Yeah. Like 3 or 4 years ago, I used to do like most people do, most knife makers. And, I would, stop everything and just build knives for the show for like a month and a half. And, it was great. You ended up with a whole fistful of cash, but you came home and you paid bills and it was no different. So now I try to go with the plan of keeping all the bills paid, keeping everybody, and with employees, I have to do that too. And CNC payments and all that stuff. There's stuff I have to do. So I can't stop like I used to. And so basically it's like shows are extra. So I got to work extra hours and try to fit that stuff in. And there hasn't been very many extra hours lately, it seems like. So
yeah,
we'll make it happen. Might not sleep between now and TKI, which is like 5 days.
Yeah.
It's not far away.
All I can say is I'm poor.
Yeah. Even though I'm paying the bills, I'm still poor, but hopefully I can, I'm hoping to have 4 knives for the show. I think I can do that. It's not the most I've taken, but if they're It is what it is.
That's one we didn't have on our list that I thought about this morning was knife makers as financial powerhouse as a rule of thumb.
Yeah, I thought about that too, man. Because it's like, the myth is you can just quit your job and knife making's easy kind of thing. But,
right.
It's a hard gig. You got to be you really have to be self-motivated to be a knife maker. And then even if you're self-motivated, if you don't wear all the hats right, it's still tough, because you got to be a designer, you got to be a fabricator, you got to be a artist, you have to be a marketing guru, all these different hats.
Yep. All you got to do is quit your job and start making knives, and then it's easy living.
Easy money.
That's right.
Yeah, we just debunked our first myth.
People still won't buy it.
No, it's okay.
Some people do, though. It depends on how you go into it.
Very true.
It really depends on if you go in it as like we talked about before, as a hobby or as a passion versus a business. And if you go in it as a businessman, you can definitely make money at it. It just takes
well, even like it's a passion for us. I think we can make money. We can make a living. Is it easy? No, that's what we're just, debunking right there.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a recipe or formula that equals instant success, like using fancy materials on every knife? No, there's not,
The formula, there's definitely a pattern that's starting to shape itself versus what it was when we were coming up back in the day.
Yeah, but if you don't have the skills and you follow the formula, it ain't going to work.
True. That's true.
So,
well, for sure, there's just like real life and a real job working for the man, there's a large amount of right place, right time as part of the scene, right? I mean, there's definitely people that have kind of come onto the scene, gotten extremely popular and done very well for themselves very quickly in what appears to be an easy way, maybe in a more calculated way than it might look at on the surface, but right place, right time really matters, right? And that's in all aspects of life.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, yeah, I guess we did jump into the myth. I'm going to say Mythbusters instead of Mythbusters probably 50 times during the show. So
I cannot say it for some reason.
Yeah.
Mythbusters.
The Bobby Boucher version.
Mm-hmm.
See, the other thing we wanted to mention is this show's probably going to come out slightly behind schedule because we're recording it the day it should be released. And that's due to some schedule stuff with shows and other stuff. And especially in my case, I've been traveling a ton for my job and just have not been available or around to record. So you're going to see some shuffling around of our schedule here. Nothing, I don't think we're going to have anything really significant because my stuff should slow back down here in a little bit, and then we'll be kind of on the slow ramp to Blade Show. But there's going to be a little wiggle in the schedule, so expect that.
The myth is we have nothing else going on in our lives except the podcast.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And that's busted.
Yeah. And the fact that it takes a long time to get an episode together and out, and scheduling 4 people is a challenge sometimes.
Right. And Sean's not here because of that, and I've missed one too because of life.
Yep.
And the flu.
We don't have any good witticisms. That's going to suck.
We'll have to pick up the slack.
Mm-hmm.
But at least in Sean's case, he said, "Party on, Wayne."
Swing.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So let's, I think we're kind of through the beginning piece. We already kind of tried to bust a couple of myths. Tom, you had one about D2, your favorite topic. You want to let her rip on D2 and what it's all about?
I think D2 gets like a bad rap, and that
no one is surprised by that opinion, by the way.
That is no myth. But one of the things I always hear, and it always comes up in any conversation about D2, it seems like, is that, the saying is D2 takes a crappy edge, but it holds it forever. And I'm going to go with a partial true on this. It does hold it forever. It has pretty good wear resistance. So there is a partial truth to this, but I think the crappy edge part comes from the fact that D2 has that high wear resistance. It's hard to sharpen. And if you don't have diamond hones or a belt sander, you're not going to be able to sharpen it as well as you should. And I think that's where that crappy edge comes from, because I can make a D2 blade top hair off your arm. I mean, and I can do that with hand hones too. Like if you know, when you're sharpening, I think most people start out with way too fine of a stone. And because of that, you spend a lot of time, and that means that it's really hard to keep that angle accurate. I think most people should have a coarse diamond stone, a fine diamond stone, and really you can do 95% of all your sharpening with those two stones. If you're wanting something to go in the field, what's the diamond hone company? They Dufold make a Dufold diamond hone that has that combination. It's perfect. And really that makes a really toothy edge. It's a great edge for the field. It cuts meat really well. But if you're really wanting to go to that next step where, you know, you want a finer edge, you really need to polish that edge with something. And Spyderco makes the two-sided pocket hone that's perfect. It's got fine and medium on either side. And if you'll just take a few swipes after you get it to that burr on the fine diamond hone, just to micro polish that edge, D2 takes a pretty good edge. I think that myth is due to skill. So if you hear somebody say that, realize they have less skill than they should.
Skill, or maybe not choosing the right tool to sharpen with, or whatever, right?
Correct.
So we're realizing that D2 is bad, right? That's what we want people to know.
No. I think D2 is a great steel. Are there better steels out now? For different uses, I'll agree possibly. I use quite a few different steels. It all depends on the use. You know, if you're trying to chop with D2, you're probably using the wrong steel. If you're trying to carve with D2, you're probably using the wrong steel, because you'd be better served with a finer grain. It just carves better. Will it work better on other things? Maybe not. You know, everything in steels is a trade-off, and that's one of the next myths that we'll go over for me down the road. But we live in a day and age where there's so many awesome steels, you can't really go wrong.
Right. Lots of great choices, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes right choice for the job, right tool for the job, right? I mean, there's a piece of it that, I don't know, everybody wants to find, and this is true with lots of stuff, right? What's the one best car for all things of all time, right? Okay, well, it might be sub-optimized for a bunch of things, right? Same with steels. What's the one best steel for all things all time? Of course, Tom would say D2, but, you know.
I probably wouldn't say D2.
Yeah.
You know, because for chopping, which is a pretty big thing, I don't think a D2 knife should be a chopping knife.
Yeah.
Yeah. The big thing here is blanket statements don't work. And that's where we get into a lot of trouble. Like you go to sort of an outlier Facebook group, you know, that kind of has probably a lot of newer people, and you'll just see a blanket statement, you know, the steel doesn't work, you know, and sometimes it's D2 because, you know, it's kind of it's been used for a while.
If you've had a bad experience with it, or you don't have the right tools or knowledge to sharpen it, you're going to have a bad experience with it. But for the kind of knives that I mostly build, the smaller EDC fixed blades, it works pretty good.
Yeah. No, it works great. But I think people need to really read into the minutia, the subtlety, and all aspects of a steel and of a topic before they just make this blanket statement of such and such doesn't work, or this is a reason this is great. And that's where we get into a lot of trouble, and the reason these myths kind of get perpetuated.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people in our industry, you know, a lot of customers have minimal knowledge about steel properties, what they do good and bad. And that's just self-education. But, you know, maybe they aren't interested in that as much as we are. And, you know,
the bad part is you could self-educate yourself incorrectly, because there's so much
Right.
bad information out there. You know, people can do research and really still not have good information.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. So we've decided that D2 is awesome. And that's a wrap. We'll see you next time.
All right.
Tom,
Do-do-do-do-do-do.
it's a wrap.
Here's one I want to hit: the drop shedding.
Oh boy, here we go. Buckle up, people.
All right. I rub my hands together. Probably sounds like sandpaper there, just for you listeners. I don't know where this came from. It's kind of like this sort of, I don't know, you started seeing people, because this was probably a, 2015, maybe a little bit earlier type of phenomenon we started seeing, where people started drop shutting the knife, where that means basically, you know, you've got your folder, you know, you open the lock and you hold it and you just kind of, usually it's this weird shaking method, and you just watch the blade fall shut.
The wiggle.
You know, wiggle it, or sometimes you'll just see it fall like without any wiggling at all. And it somehow turned into this sort of idea that if your knife can drop shut, that means it's a quality knife. There's so many damn variables into that it makes zero sense. I mean, it's not a sign of tolerances. It's not a sign of, which is another word that gets overused and misused so much. Tolerances. Woo! That one gets me. But, you know, you could have a loose pivot. You could have, you know, the pivot could be loose in the blade. It could be loose as in it's not tightened against the handles. It could have a very weak lock bar. It doesn't mean that it's got smooth washers and this and that. I mean, just a knife on bearings is going to be able to drop. But that doesn't mean it's a better knife, because...
Well, it has to do with the weight of the blade, too. I mean, if you've got a gigantic, thick-ass, long blade, it's going to drop shut better than an 1/8-inch, 2-inch blade. I mean... Yeah.
But it's not the metric for smoothness. And that's where we need to really look into. Just because it falls shut, and I think that's where people like to compare the two. Look how smooth it is because it just falls shut on its own. Well... Okay, so let's say you do have a tight pivot and all this, but you have a very, very weak lock bar, which means no pressure of the detent against the blade, which that is the point of friction. Largest point of friction is the detent riding across the blade. But if you have a very weak lock bar, you're going to have issues down the road as far as, you know, that detent getting pushed outward, you know, against that lock bar is going to really put undue wear on a weak lock bar. So you really need to look at why it's doing that. And it's not saying that drop shutting means it's a bad knife, and it's not saying that it means it's a good knife. It really means it does nothing. That's what we're saying here.
And it probably
nothing.
means that your pivot isn't tight enough, you know, I mean...
But I mean, if sometimes I'll have a larger blade and it's on bearings,
yeah,
it shuts too fast. And I'm like, ugh. It's, to me, a bit scary how fast some of those shut. And that's not really what we want. You know, we want it to be a safe knife, you know?
Yeah. And it can be drop dead smooth. Everything's tuned perfectly and it's on washers. It may not drop shut like that. I don't know. That's one of those things that always makes me shake my head too.
Well, a good example is like my Scott Cook Loxa. There is no doubt it's a well-built knife. I don't know if anyone can say that's not a well-built knife. It doesn't drop shut because it has a very hard detent or very hard lock bar for, you know, longevity as far as wear and things like that. It's a great knife, but it doesn't drop shut, and it doesn't matter. It's still smooth, and it's a well-built knife.
Yeah,
that's a great example.
I think sometimes, I think some of this comes out of people not completely understanding. I also think that this is sort of, I don't know, it feels like a little bit of fallout of the social media generation of the knife world, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where someone wants to make a video, right? Everybody loves video. Videos made lots of people lots of money. It's made lots of people internet famous. You know, people have got a lot of free shit out of video making and other stuff. And so everybody wants to make videos, and it's an easy way to try to show smoothness in a video, or low friction in a video is what they're really showing. Right. And I think, that can that's maybe perpetuated itself into some kind of worthiness test for whether the knife's any good or not, or the action of the knife or whatever. And I think, your point's a great one about the Loxa or Sebenza. You know what I mean? There's lots of examples.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a funny one, and we're going to have a few other examples like this where in many cases, I think it comes down to personal preference as well, right? Where I've seen lots of people complain that a knife, like you said, closed too fast, which is perfect from a drop shot perspective. But, I agree. There's a point where it's like, wow, that blade wants to come close awful quick once you take it off the lock. Maybe it wouldn't hurt if it was a little bit slower.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know. There's like, Jerry McInnes used the Princess and the Pea reference, right? Where it's like there's some kind of perfection point that only a certain person can feel or whatever. And I don't know. This is a really good example of that.
Well, it's like you don't want it gritty. You don't want, you don't want that detent riding across, etched Damascus doing a, Mars rover ride. You do want it to be smooth, but you also want it to that's it. You just want it to be smooth. It doesn't need to do anything besides that. You want to try to make the frictional coefficient higher or lower, whichever that means with your detent ball, but there's always going to be friction, and that's okay.
Right. Yeah. We should have called this the Kids Get Off My Lawn episode.
But yeah, this is a ranty episode.
It's not too late.
Episode 42, Get Off My Lawn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we may have to use that. Well, I mentioned Jerry. I asked Jerry if he had any that he would suggest for it. He did throw in a few, which is pretty cool. And this is no surprise to anyone who's handled Jerry's work, was some frustration around something that Michael just talked about, which is the feel of the detent. In this case, the opening detent. And Jerry's knives tend to be on the snappy side. The detent's pretty, I would call it square edged feeling, because I don't know what better way to describe it. It's very snappy. And it's just part of what the way Jerry's knives are. It's the way he likes them, I think. And I think they work great. They fire off the detent super fast, and they fire very, very well. But detent's a very interesting thing because it very much comes down to personal preference. I've stood at Michael's table before and had people say that they couldn't open a knife because the detent was too stiff. And then the exact same knife, another person 30 minutes later comes by and checks it out and says, wow, I'd really like this knife if the detent was a little stronger.
It's weird.
Yeah.
And I think it has to do with personal hand strength too. As knife makers, our hands are pretty strong. We work with them all day, every day. And we also, like when Jerry's building flippers, a stronger detent does make the action 100% better,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. No, but it is so crazy because I've talked to customers that have done this thing where they will say, I bought this secondhand, too strong, too soft, too whatever. And that Princess and the Pea is a perfect example because everyone has their preference, and it's usually based off of either what the knife was they had before or what someone told them they needed to have.
Right.
And the interesting thing, if you toss in like a micro version of a knife, that's where things get real weird because it also changes. It has nothing really to do with hand strength. It has to do with how you're holding it. I'll get people that take a little micro and they'll kind of do a weird little, not quite sure how to open it. But for me, I've been sitting there playing with them, so I know how to kind of pinch it and do it and do it right. It's how you hold it. It's how you get used to it. And I used to do a very, very stiff detent, and that sometimes the problem you'll come across that if it's like almost like rock hard, not going to move at all type of detent, the problem is that detent ball is dropping almost all the way into the detent hole.
Right.
and which is great, except for the issue of longevity. How long is that detent ball going to stay there? Because you'll have wear in the opening and the closing of the knife. It's significantly less with the closing because you're not banging it open all the way, but you still have wear. Once again, if it closes really fast with that drop shutting type of action on the closing aspect of the knife. So over the years, when it closes, you're going to create wear in that detent ball. So if it's already almost dropped all the way into that hole, when it wears and it drops all the way into it, that's where you get that horrible kind of, what do you call that? Kind of soft feel before the detent engages.
Right, where there's some squish.
A squish there, a little looseness. So you basically used up all your detent. So it's like, so in the past few years, I've really tried to change how I design stuff to give a mechanical leverage to the flipper versus relying solely on the detent, because the flipper is always going to be there. Detent's going to change no matter how we want to think about it. So you've got to take that into account when you're looking at a knife or buying a knife. Okay, it's strong, it's whatever, but look at the mechanics of it, feel it, and try to understand what is going to last long. You know, if it matters to you. It may not matter. You may just want something to play and pass on.
Yeah, I think the secondhand point that you brought up is a great example, right? The nice part about being at a show, or one of the great parts about being at a show, and we've talked about this before, is you get to handle stuff in person, right? You can talk to the maker, you can ask questions, you can see how something works. And if there's an opportunity to buy, then you've had it in your hands. But when you buy something secondhand, that opportunity usually isn't there unless you got a local pal that's got something really cool that you want. And that's part of the process, right? You might buy something and it's not your thing, or it's not to your taste or preference. And I know that's not a knife maker's favorite thing, to have a customer come back and say, hey, this knife you built 5 years ago that I just bought, I don't like the detent, or I don't like the edge geometry, or whatever, right? It's kind of, it is what it is. It's a point in time.
Yeah, and it always seems like the maker's the first one a customer gets a hold of versus who they bought it from used, you know?
Well,
it's very, you know, if someone bought something off Craigslist, you know, they don't contact the washing machine company first before they contact the person they bought it from if it doesn't work how they like. So it's a very strange type of thing. And I get it, you know, because we're trying to be readily available to the customers, but at the same time, that's not always how we want to be used.
Well, and this isn't the detent, but down the same, you know, vein, it's like of thought. It's, you know, I often get people who buy a folder or fixed blade and they're like, hey, I love this knife. I just bought it. I hate the handles. Can you replace them?
Ooh.
You know? I'm like, no, don't buy. If you don't like the knife, don't buy it. Because here's the bottom line. I'd rather make a new knife than put half the work into an old knife, you know?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I used to get that quite, actually more than you would think, about changing the handles.
Yes. Weekly almost.
And I've actually done it before. I used to be very bad about saying no. And that's something I learned pretty quickly.
You mean you used to be bad about saying yes?
Sure. I was doing it wrong. However, that's
Yeah, I've started. I won't do it anymore unless, you know.
I don't think either of you guys is saying with a functional aspect to the knife that someone has a question about that they shouldn't ask you about it. But
right.
Asking you to rebuild the knife is a whole different story.
No,
you don't like the scales or whatever.
Yeah, I have no issue explaining or telling why I do this, or, you know, why something is that. But it's harder to explain when it just comes as, this doesn't work how I want it. Make it different.
Right.
Like you said, a 5-year-old knife. You know?
Well,
okay.
And like you said, it's not terribly uncommon for what makers make to change over time, right? Especially, you know, like to me, it's obvious because I own a bunch of your early work and a bunch of your new work and a bunch of things in between, and they're very different knives, right? I mean, they're functionally different knives. They're visually different knives. They're geometry of the blade is different. I mean, they're just really, really different knives, and that's normal. I think it's part of the process. And sometimes people don't really consider that aspect of it. And maybe they've handled a newer piece and they get an older piece and are surprised that it's different, or, you know what I mean? The other way around even. And it really shouldn't be that much of a surprise.
Yeah.
Kind of goes back to the doing your homework piece.
Well, and I mean, that's how it should be. Our work should be getting better. I look at, I get knives in, folders in to tune up or whatever, and I look at them and it's like, this is 10 years ago. And I did things a lot differently, and hopefully I've learned a little bit. My folders have improved every year, every folder. That's what I shoot for.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, it's an obsessive chase to some perfection we'll never achieve, but things change in the process of trying to achieve it.
Yep, exactly.
I don't know. In that same vein, you want to talk about Teflon washers?
Yeah, go for it.
Want to hit on that?
It's solidly in the same kind of category for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is just one long rant. When did Teflon go out of vogue? When did this happen? Why did it turn bad?
As soon as IKBS became a marketing advantage.
Yep, I was just going to say that.
Yeah, I don't know. Remember the last time I made a knife with Teflon, because people have just like hated it. I guess the V2s, V3s were Teflon because people hated them so much.
Right.
They think it's inferior, that it somehow doesn't live up to tolerances, or there's that word again that they think they need, when it's solidly a great material for using for washers.
I think it's almost harder to make a knife with Teflon washers that's proper versus bearings. I think bearings are kind of a shortcut.
No, well, I'm talking about versus like phosphor bronze washers.
Oh, either one is great.
Yeah, they both work great. They are admittedly harder to make a knife with phosphor bronze bearings. Now, or not bearings, with the washers. Because it has to be exact. And the reason you don't see a ton of it out there with a lot of custom makers is not always because it's harder. It's because how is it going to be treated later? Because if it gets tightened or loosened, which happens more than we like to say by customers, it changes how that knife works. Teflon gives you a little bit of leeway for the customer to be like, like we said, if something deploys too fast, too slowly, you can actually tighten that just a smidge, slow it down. You can loosen it just a smidge. It's got a touch, a give. And it doesn't mean that the maker is lazy for using that, or they're trying to forego, having the right, having the right dimensions on their backspacer and stuff like that to make it work correctly. It just means they want a knife that's a little more forgiving for the customer, not always for themselves. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But it seemed like that went to the wayside. I mean, like Kit Carson used them. And I saw actually what made me think of this, I saw not too long ago, Peter Carey was making one with Teflon. And I was like, all right, man. I didn't know people were still using it. But it's a great material. It lasts. It's smooth. It gives the customer a little give, a little bit of whatever. It's a good material.
Right.
Well, and they're cheap and easy to make and replace as needed.
They are. Yeah. In the mid-tech type of stuff, I had like one set. I don't know what happened to it, but it actually like somehow split, which I don't know how that's even possible because of the way the Teflon material is made. It's not like it's layered, squeezed, and done, but it somehow split.
It split like D-Lam?
Yeah.
Really?
Like
weird.
Yeah, it was a strange, I saw that and actually started looking up how Teflon's made and went in this weird little, rabbit hole of, I wonder how is this common? No, it's not common. It was a weird one. So, but I mean, first class mailed some other whatever new ones and that was done, fixed. Hell, I used to stamp my own out for quite a while.
Yeah, I still do. I had a set of carbide dies made so I can make like 5 or 6 different sizes.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you still use Teflon?
I do on frame locks with a composite side, because bearings don't really work for that unless you put like a steel insert. And most of the time I'm doing that, I'm trying to get as thin as possible. And so, a 30 thousandths insert plus the bearings, and your pivot, I don't like my pivot sitting on top. So really on frame locks, I do, if I'm not using a titanium offside liner, I do use Teflon still. I've still got it in the shop for repairs too, when knives come in, because I use it a lot early on.
Yeah.
Speaking about bronze, I think Chris Reeves Knives does bronze as good or better than anyone in the industry.
I'm going to say McGinnis and Reeves. Because
McGinnis, I've never looked at a McGinnis one, but I know if Jerry's using them, I know he's doing it right.
Yeah, they are so well done. And I'm actually got 2 of my knives going to TKI have phosphor bronze washers.
Wow. So
really,
have you ever looked at the Chris Reeves knives? Mm-hmm. Like they use the pivot. What do they have? Like a bushing that goes around it, so you can smash the pivot down as tight as possible, and it won't over tighten on the washers. It's like there's no adjusting. You just crank it down as tight as you can get it, and boom, you're done.
Yeah, that's the way to do it, because that's the only issue with these phosphor bronzes. If you tighten, it changes everything. But if if those phosphor bronze, if they're done right, they are
that's nice.
Silky smooth and fantastic.
Yep. Yeah, I know, right? Like Rick Hinder in the last couple of years has done this tri-way pivot thing where he's kind of had to engineer it, or decided to engineer it where it could be Teflon or bronze or bearings with like a certain stack of material, because he had so many people whiplashing all kinds of crazy directions, right? He built them for so long with Teflon washers, and people complained about wanting to replace them with bronze, and then why didn't he have bearings, and he put bearings in and people wanted it the other direction. Why'd you go away from that? So now he's got it kind of arranged where you can run any way you want, and it's actually to the issue.
It's a really smart solution.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's like have it your way. It's like Burger King, man.
Well, it's almost like we've gotten this whiplash of, I've seen it, I guess, in places where people are like, if makers that use bearings are cheating sort of idea. And it's like, what? It's just another way of opening a knife. It's not a cheating way of doing it. It's just the way to do it. Like you'll see, like, once again, Jerry makes flippers with bearings, which are not bearings, with the
with bronze washers.
And which is tough. It's tough to do.
Oh yeah.
But it doesn't mean, like, when people say, bearings versus washers are just popular because they work well. It's just another tool, another, system of doing it. So it's gotten kind of weird out there with the whole washers versus bearings versus all that stuff.
It's the Sneetches, man. Dr. Seuss.
Oh God, yeah.
Whatever you have is what must be the best.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I know Tom's got one that's near and dear to his heart. He likes to talk about steel. So Tom, give this one a whirl.
Okay. Well, I really do think that this is a huge myth, and I understand why, but it seems that there's a common misconception that steel is the only thing that matters in performance. And you see this especially with like knife companies, because all they advertise is what steel it is, and they use the latest and greatest, and M390 is coming out and everything. But it's interesting, and we just had like a Steelgate here recently where a company was using a high-end steel, but they were putting it in at a Rockwell hardness that was way low, and then they doubled down on it and said that was intentional, and it's like, okay. But, I always describe performance. We talk about high performance and, love him or hate him. Ed Fowler was one of the early performance, guys as far as trying to make these high performance knives. And in my opinion, steel performance is a three-legged stool. there's three main things. Without one of them, that stool won't stand up anymore. And the legs of that stool are the steel, the heat treatment, and the geometry. Those three things are what makes a knife perform. And you also have to take into account what type of performance you need, what type of knife. You know, if you're wanting a box cutter versus something to chop frozen wood, you're going to need different things, different geometry, different steels, different heat treatments. But all things being the same, it seems like steel is the most easily quantified. And so that's where all the emphasis gets put. And I think that is wrong. I think, me personally, and we can argue or discuss this, me personally, I think that heat treatment is the most important of those three. You could take a less high performance steel and hit the heat treat spot on, and it's going to outperform a better steel that's heat treated poorly. All things the same.
Yeah.
Those two things.
I think to your earlier comment, it really gets to perform what task, right? I mean,
right.
It's probably arguable that any of the three legs that you mentioned is the most important one, depending on what it is that you're trying to perform to, right? Or what the task is that you're using it for.
Yeah, yes and no. I really think steel is the least important of the three, which is crazy for me, but it's the easiest to quantify, like I said. So that's where everybody focuses on.
Yeah, it's really hard to describe edge geometry in an ad or in a catalog write up about a blade, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, and there's also a lot of these companies are making knives to perform for the dumbest customer. I mean, dude, think about what some of these people do to their shit. I mean, seriously. And then get upset about it. Unreal expectations of what a knife can do, especially a folding knife.
Thanks, YouTube.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've seen people chopping concrete blocks to test stuff, and yeah, right. I don't know. That's been going on a long time, way back from Al Buck and Rick Tigg pounding their knives through horseshoes and stuff like that. That's not necessarily anything new, but it's an interesting thing. And Sean had one. You know, Sean's not able to be here, but one of his myths was a knife has to be Rockwell 61 in order to cut or to perform. And that plays into the heat treat. You know, I think heat treat is important, and knowing the properties of steel, because one Rockwell hardness isn't ideal for all steels. It just isn't, or uses. So you really need to, once again, as a knife maker or as a company, we need to understand the steel, the properties, you know, actually have a working understanding of this stuff, the geometries. If you're making an axe, don't hollow grind it. That won't be a good edge. You know, don't flat grind it either. It really should be convex ground, because otherwise it'll stick. But there's a lot of interesting stuff that goes into this, and it seems like we get tied up on steel, and that's where we just want to stay as far as performance.
Well, I think to your point, I think you're saying steel is the least important, probably because every steel we use is kind of stronger than we need it to be. They're all good enough for what we need it to be that we use. So it's like it's not that steel isn't important. It's just that they're all tough enough to do what we usually use it for.
Well, yeah, we could. I mean, you know, you could make a high performance knife out of 1095.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to blow people's socks off. But if you tried to sell the same knife in 1095 or M390, even though that's a poor example, because basically, you know, I know that you're going to hit the geometry. I know you're going to hit the heat treat, and you're going to make that steel perform. I guess this goes back to a conversation I had with a guy a while back, and it's, you know, basically, can you take high quality materials and turn them into an inferior product? And I think that's possible.
Oh, absolutely possible.
And that's a whole nother myth that we probably won't get into today, but anyways, that's it. I think the three-legged stool analogy is a good one, and I think that should be on people's minds as much as the steel. Think about the geometry and the heat treat, or the Rockwell C hardness.
Well, the Rockwell is such a weird thing. All our butcher steels that we used for butchering, growing up, stuff like that, they were nowhere near 61. They were very low. All those Green River type of knives were very low Rockwell that you were able to sharpen on your sharpening steel very quickly and go back to work.
Yeah, just touch up the edge easily and keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's where the example I was thinking of was the those Victorinox Fibrox kitchen knives that we've talked about before. They're not some kind of super steel by any stretch. They aren't heat treated super hard. They are very, 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 very thin. And they're I think at a hardness where they're easy to sharpen, and so for the task they're fantastic. I think in almost completely probably related to the geometry, right? They're designed geometry wise to do kitchen work, and that's it, right?
But their heat treat is spot on. I mean, it's not super hard, but it's
where it needs to be for the job.
Yeah.
That's my point. Is it's where it needs to be for the task. You wouldn't take one of those and try to baton through a piece of wood. It wouldn't last very long, right? One hit, it's probably done. But
you'd be surprised. It's actually, I've done that with the kitchen paring knives. I've actually batoned with them. They're actually AEBL, which is an extremely tough steel.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah, but is that the best use? Probably not.
Right.
Tom.
Sorry. What?
Guys, don't be batoning your Victorinox kitchen knives just because Tom did it.
They're $5, dude. I used it when I had a wood stove. I used it to baton kindling, and that was what I used. It worked great. They cut.
No, you were trying to make your YouTube channel famous.
Clickbait.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
Good
the
stuff.
motivations become clear.
Well, those knives aren't overbuilt. Maybe we should talk about that.
Nice segue. I appreciate that.
Right?
You shoved Birch up onto the soapbox.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one's just a little misnomer that bothers me, and I don't know if it really bothers anyone else out there, but the term gets used so much for a knife that's just got thick materials in it, and overbuilt should mean built to work well with the materials used. To me, overbuilt, this is one of those where it's my opinion, not everyone else's opinion. Let's say you're making an 1/8 inch thick, small, slim folder, and you use 1/4 inch pivots, tight tolerances, and like real tolerances, not just a word tossed out there.
Not air quote tolerances.
Yeah. You use, really thick stop pin, like a 3/16. That would be overbuilt for the materials used. A knife that is got a 1/4 inch thick blade with huge slabs of titanium with a 1/8 inch stop pin and a 3/16 or whatever, that is not overbuilt. That is built to fail. Unless it's done correctly. I mean, even that can be done correctly. But this whole idea of having just this brick of a knife and calling it overbuilt just for the sake of saying, oh, it's thick and big and crazy, which I've done those knives. I get it. But you have to understand that those thick materials are going to be harder on the hardware used to build them with.
Right.
So you need to compensate for that. And that's by using thicker and better types of materials. But you don't see that quite a bit. You just see like this thick thing and you're like, that does not look like it's going to hold,
I've never understood the idea of an overbuilt folder. It's still a folder. Build big knives, build them properly. They're cool. They're super cool. If you do them right, they don't need to be overbuilt, quote unquote. They still have a pivot in them. I mean, they're never going to be, you shouldn't be like chopping, I don't think, ever with a folder, in my opinion.
No, that's not what they're for. It's kind of like the old pistol and rifle thing. The pistol gets you so you can get your rifle.
Long gun. Yeah.
Yeah, the folder should be used for the task it's made for. Now, they're fun. I'll give it that. The big folders are fun. But just know all that weight is going to slam hard. And where I don't know if people... Okay. You can tell when I get in ranty mode is when I start doing that stutter thing. Okay. Here we go. All right.
I've already gotten 8 hate mails on this topic, and I haven't even stopped the recording yet.
Hadn't even been released.
Well, yeah,
okay.
I mean...
So...
Go ahead, Michael.
Now, hold on, Tom. I'm in the middle of my rant.
Yeah, go ahead.
Revving up.
Rant.
He's on a roll.
I'm spooling. Okay, so you have like the stop pin, and here's where it gets me sometimes. If you want strength in your stop pin to where the blade hits it when it's opening and closing, you've got to strengthen that as much as possible. And that means trying to dig it in as deep as possible into your handle as you can. Sometimes I see this very strange, like thin, shallow stop pin hole, and it'll be loose. And it's like, okay, if you have a loose stop pin hitting against titanium, you're going to start to wall it out. You're going to turn that hole into an egg shape because it's going to slam it against it, especially if it's shallow. Now, if you deepen that hole and get those stop pins to go as far into the handle as you can, you're making it significantly stronger. Structurally stronger is what you want. Things like that make your knife overbuilt. Just stronger, thicker materials don't make it overbuilt. All right.
But it'll still eventually pound on that titanium because the titanium's a weak spot,
It is, but if
there's
you
certain
give it,
things. Yeah, no, I
you
agree
give it
100%
enough
with what you're
surface
saying.
area to where that pounding is minimal, or where it's not affecting it. Like, especially if it's like you get like a really loose stop pin, it will slam it up against that. If you got a tight one, it's not giving it room to smash against it. It's still going to wear. All things wear. All things mechanical will break, but you're lessening the chances of it doing that. And it used to be like this weird thing of, and I'm not saying like an 1/8 inch stop pin is not enough, because the tensile strength of those is like, it's pretty, not tensile. I mean the
Shear strength.
Shear strength is huge on those. On the, like, even the ones you get from, McMaster or MSC, stuff like that. It's how you put that in relation to the geometry of the lock, where the stop pin location is, and the materials used, and how deep you go with it. It's kind of like Tom's 3-footed stool. The same thing kind of goes with how your geometry is done with your knives. That is almost more important than the materials, how you use them, how you treat them in connection to, all the locations. So ran off.
Yeah. Well,
Time
and
to
it's
take a breath.
well, we talk about these big folders. I've made 2 oversized alphas. I did them for TKI last 2 times I went, and it was fun. It was basically, I don't know if you guys have ever looked at like the Sheffield exhibition pieces that they used to make for like the World's Fair and different stuff back in the day. Those pieces weren't meant to be carried or used. They functioned. You could have taken one out in the field, but those were like to show what you could do, right? Yeah. And that's how I built the 2 alphas I did. And I left clips off of them intentionally because they were boat anchors, right? They're super heavy. They were thick, quote unquote, overbuilt. They weren't meant. They were meant for a collection. Could you use them? Sure. Is it the best thing to use? Probably not. And I didn't put clips on them intentionally because they weren't meant to be carried, right?
Yeah. I've made some, and Savag has one now, and every time I see him, he'll whip that big old bastard out and be like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I didn't put clips on them. I got asked multiple times to put clips on them over and over, and I just was like, no, I'm not gonna. So, but yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. It's an
exhibition piece. It's that's
what it was.
Okay, so another myth that our friend Jerry McGinnis asked us to include or suggested was the measure of quality of a knife as to whether it can do the multi-finger flick. If you've ever checked out knife stuff on Instagram, you'll see people opening knives with their thumb, with their index finger, with their middle finger, with their ring finger. And because this knife is so awesome, I can actually open it with my pinky finger, and maybe some combinations of those as well. Who the hell knows? But it was one that Jerry brought up. It is a very interesting one. And I don't know if you guys want to throw anything in about that as a test of whether a knife is any good. Maybe it goes back to that whole action discussion.
Go ahead, Tom.
I personally think it's more about the dexterity of the person doing it than the quality or finish or anything about the knife. My son Zach is super into all that. He can flip it with middle finger, pinky toe. I don't know. Do the Spidey flick, upside down. Man, I can't do any of that shit. He'll hand me a knife and be like, doing all that stuff, and I'm lucky to get it open.
Yeah, I think it's also part of like a look what I can do sort of thing. Like, check out my finger popping abilities.
Right.
It's a strange type of Instagram phenomenon you see, but where it translates is you'll see a guy come up to your table at a show and try to like do it, and it's awkward, and it's a new knife they've never seen before or touched, and be like, just open it normal. And that's where I don't
drop it on your table of all your other knives.
I haven't had one drop, but it's a very awkward type of situation where I'm watching him fumble with my knife, and I'm scared. He's trying to look cool. It's not looking cool. Just open it normal. Then if you buy it, or if you win it or whatever it is, then you go home and you can finger pop it all day long. That it's not the place to be showing off or trying to.
At New York, I'm not even exaggerating. I had 3 people drop my folders on the table.
Yeah.
I don't know what was going on.
That's crazy.
It's an interesting thing because, like Tom said, maybe, I don't know, I must not have the right kind of dexterity, because if I've ever tried to do that, even slowly, I always end up feeling like I'm going to somehow have a finger or multiple fingers end up following the blade, and I'm always afraid I'm going to hack a fucking finger off. It's like, whoa, I'm sure I'm doing the motion wrong, but I don't know. It's like, okay, there's no value in this. It doesn't make my life better. Maybe if I manage to somehow keep my opposable thumb and lose a couple fingers, I could get a knife open in an emergency situation. But I tend to think it's like Tom said, it's kind of a show of a demonstration of personal dexterity or something.
I've done it before, and I did it, and I was like, okay, and that was the extent of it. But I'm also dexterous as fuck.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, Tom, is that your New York knives were shit because people dropped them when they were trying to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe not because of that reason, but yeah.
Were they overbuilt?
Oh.
I don't think any of my folders are overbuilt.
Except those 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true story. But,
No, that's an interesting one.
It is interesting. And then Jerry admitted he's a middle finger bottom flick kind of guy. So it was kind of funny that he brought it up, and then it turns out that's how he opens a folder too. But that's a whole other topic. We'll get into Jerry in a future episode. We'll shame him for his behavior.
You want me to do my Jerry impersonation?
Oh, yeah, do it.
I just finished a knife.
That makes me sad.
Pretty good, huh?
Very good. It sounded just like him.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Birch had a very obscure... This is what happens when you say, okay, guys, this is a show where you can complain about shit. And Birch came up with a very obscure knife myth thing that he wanted to talk about. And I don't know if this one's a myth or if it's just a little personal rant or what, but take it away, Michael, on this Damascus versus pattern welded thing.
This is more of a, if you go back to the early days of the forum times, this was something you just saw argued over and over. People would get upset if you called Damascus that wasn't made in the 12th century Damascus. Even though, like Bill Moran came back and started calling his pattern welded steel Damascus. And the fact that, like Walter Sorrells was said in his book, called it Damascus. But people get kind of upset, some people, if you're like, that's Damascus. Well, it's pattern welded. Tom, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean,
Tom.
words matter, Michael.
Oh boy. Here we go.
No, I think just using our common vocabulary, what we're calling Damascus, calling it Damascus works. It's pattern welded steel. We've been calling it Damascus since Moran reinvented it. The Germans were making it in World War II, but, they weren't American apparently. So we had to reinvent it. So,
No, they actually weren't American.
Yeah, no,
That's
not an apparently. That's an actual.
that's the truth.
no, I'm just saying apparently we had to reinvent it.
I can also see all the way from Michigan that Tom is putting air quotes every time he says Damascus.
Ironically, I did. I used my hands.
I heard the
That was awesome.
around those air quotes.
I seen it.
But in reality, true Damascus is not pattern welded. It's Woots, which is the awesome stuff that you'll see if you go to some of these museums and see the talwars, with the watered steel.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally different, and
Okay.
that process has been reinvented, and there's a couple people doing it, and it's pretty freaking awesome. Al Pingree is one of the forerunners.
But people said that's been disappeared since the Egyptians, it's, or whatever it is. Yeah, there's people that argue about that's not true Woots. Woots went away with the ancient aliens or some shit.
I don't think it was Egyptians. I think it would probably be the Indians.
I'm not sure who
Damascus is in.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, anyways.
But the point is that it's, like you said, it's a name. And I think people will get upset and be like, I don't know if people thought it was like a selling point or if it's just someone wants to be contrarian and just be like, I know better than you, and be like, it's not actually. It reminds me of that kind of meme of that, well, actually.
What's the whole magazine versus clip thing? I mean, kind of.
I was just going to bring that up.
Which is
like,
yeah. Well, I got to the point where I started calling them clips just to piss people off, but then I would start to say it then and be like, shit, I'd get myself in trouble. And what's
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I'm going to sound completely hypocritical when I bring up my issue here in a couple questions.
That's a great point. You absolutely are.
Well, I mean, and the thing is, it's like, I don't know if you remember, like for me, I love magazines, and back in the late 80s.
Kind of magazines.
You mean honestly, clips? I pretty much like any magazine, most magazines that I just enjoy printed material because I can take it with me and read it wherever. And there was no internet back then. So that's just how that worked. But knife magazines of the 80s, there was a lot of misconceptions on what quote unquote Damascus was. I remember it's so much better because it's tougher, because if it breaks, it's only going to break one layer at a time. And remember all that crap?
It was mystical. That was the whole thing about it. It was a mystery. It got to be a selling point.
So much better performance cutting and
yeah. And once again, it goes back to everything we've said before. If it's done well, it's done well.
Yeah.
It all depends on who makes it and how it's made. One is not
what it's made of.
Yeah, inherently better than the other.
I do seriously want a true Woots blade.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I will have one for my collection.
It's definitely an example where, like most other industries, the knife industry oftentimes tries to create differentiation Right.
Mhm.
You have to look like you have something special as part of trying to get people to want your product. And so I'm sure that's what all that stuff was when all that happened in the 80s or whatever. But this I don't know if this is a Mythbuster topic that we just talked about, or if that's more of a what really grinds my gears kind of topic. I tend to think it's the latter, but
Well, yeah, it was very much bones of contention that went in through the magazines. Like, yeah, reading those it was great, and then it carried into the forums for many years of people arguing back and forth about all this crap.
Yeah.
all right. Let's go to the next one. Tom, you had one about shipping stuff. I know this is a a sore spot.
Yeah, I don't know that this is really a myth that much. I mean, I guess there is some, but it seems like, with Amazon and Prime and free shipping, it's a weird thing. There's a misconception that shipping shouldn't cost anything or doesn't cost anything, because if you're getting free shipping, it doesn't cost. You're not paying for shipping anywhere. Like,
Right.
that doesn't work. You're paying for shipping somewhere. And, I see so many things with shipping. It's like, we're actually starting to go to free shipping. It's not really free. We're just adding that back into the cost of the
What?
product. Shh, that's a dirty secret. Don't tell anyone.
Holy
But-
shit.
Oh boy.
But I mean, it's a perception, and it's a wrong perception. And, I see stuff like people will throw a knife in just like an envelope and ship it, and it won't get there, or to get torn up or whatever. And they're like, I don't understand it. USPS sucks. They stole, or, they do this on purpose. But really, I mean, the cost of shipping is not just postage, but there's materials. We spend every year, we're spending multiple thousands of dollars with Uline just on like peanuts and bubble wrap and fiberglass tape and
yeah. It adds
some
up fast.
boxes. Well, yeah, I mean, we're literally thousands of dollars. And so where does that money come from? It has to come from the product or the shipping fee. And that's not even taking time. So if we ship, I think we average probably 5 to 10 packages a day, depending on what we're doing. Like if we're doing mug sales or whatever. Well, that time also has to come from someone. There's only a couple people here. And if we're not making knives, that takes from the time. So, I mean, it's more than just, what do you mean? $15 for shipping. You only paid $8. Well, we didn't really only pay $8. We paid $8 to the post office, but we also bought packing supplies and time, and all that has to figure in.
Right.
So, like I said, there's a weird perception with Amazon and some of this other stuff, and we're just, we'll play the game. It actually works better if we charge you a certain fee, because you can add different things, and I don't know. It's fine. We'll just figure shipping on every single product, and we'll add that in. And then if you buy multiple things, you're actually paying for more shipping than you need, but that's what people want.
Do you call it shipping and handling? Because that's the handling part of it.
Yeah,
they're paying
I
for.
do. I always put S and H, $15 shipping and handling. But here, I get kickback on this quite a bit, and I got some this week, and I didn't handle it well, and I ended up apologizing to the guy. I try not to be an ass, but it doesn't always happen, and it all depends on when you get hit with something, right? And I think I was already having a bad time, and the dude was like, "That seems like a lot for shipping and handling." I basically quoted him. I said, "Okay, fine, it's free," and I just added the two numbers together. Shipping is free. It's this much for the product.
Right.
Like I said, I try not to be an ass. I came back later that day. I did apologize to that person because I was an ass, but it's a weird misconception that shipping is free. It's never free. Nothing is ever free.
There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Robert Heinlein. The moon is a harsh mistress. Write it down.
Yeah.
Great book.
Like you said,
know why.
I think the Amazon thing really amplified that. And I think, I do that with the ray gun bead thing. I just bake it in.
But then if somebody buys 5 beads, they paid shipping 5 times.
I figure all that in. But yes, no, you're exactly right.
That's why I've always done it the way I've done it, because it's actually beneficial for the customer. But that perception that we're charging you for shipping is pissing off most people because of the free shipping thing. So now we'll just bake it into the product and everybody pays.
Right. It's a thing where people feel like they're getting nickel and dime sometimes, right? I think that's the reaction. And they're not, right? They're actually, you're doing them a favor, but, you know.
I actually got that like 3 weeks ago too. It was like, really? You're going to hit me for $15 for shipping on a $1,000 knife? I'm like, dude, I just add up the numbers. This is the process.
Yep.
Yeah. But I think they totally do feel that way. And we're actually trying to do them a solid, but it's backfiring. So we're going to make them feel good.
Well, and I think it's part of it is the thing where people look at it like, oh, well, when I had to ship this, I either used a free box I got from the post office and or packing material that I saved and had sitting in a garbage bag somewhere from something that got shipped to me last week. So it didn't cost me anything for any of that shit. But you're exactly right. That stuff's super expensive. When I was when I did a lot of buying and selling of vintage guitar equipment amplifiers and guitars and stuff, I ran out of my stash of guitar boxes or I had to ship an amp or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but that stuff's big, right? Amplifiers are big and they're really heavy. They're like 40, 60, 80 pounds. Guitars are big, but they're also super fragile. Like a hard hit will like snap the neck off a guitar in shipment, right? Even in a nice case. So there are very proper ways to pack those things so that they survive as well. But somewhere along the way, I ran out of it. I needed a box and I needed packing material, and I didn't have the stuff stashed away in a pile in the basement. And I had to go buy a box, and a big box is way more money than people think. And I had to buy like a roll of bubble wrap, and I about choked. I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me, right? Because I never even thought about the cost of all the packing material stuff. And as a result, I absolutely identify with people not understanding it because I had to do it. And then from then on out, that actually turned into a problem. We had in one corner of the basement, like a mountain of boxes and garbage bags full of peanuts and bubble wrap and everything else. Cause I said, I'm never paying for this bullshit again. That's fucking crazy.
Well, and if you're doing it right, fiberglass tape, people need to be using fiberglass tape. Don't just use a postage box and use a self-adhesive, because that shit doesn't work. It comes undone, and that's how you lose your stuff in the mail. But fiberglass tape, put it around all three axes of the box, and you can about blow that thing up and it's not opening, you know?
Yeah. It's when it's more tape than it is box. That's the way it should be done.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and it depends on the weight of the package and all that stuff. Just, when you're packaging stuff, use good sense. I'm not a guy that tapes the stuff to the box because I make sure the box isn't going to open. And that actually irritates the hell out of me when I get a knife and it's all taped to the box and it takes forever to get it unpacked. But I totally would rather have it that way than the other way.
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah, I don't. More than one time I bought a folder that was tossed in a small flat rate with zero packing material.
Yeah.
Like in a really expensive folder. And I'm like, one, I'm amazed that this thing actually made it here. And two, it spent the last week bouncing around inside this fucking box. What the hell is wrong with this person?
You got a nice tumble finish.
Half the time it's open, right? Because a flipper tab gets bounced or something. It's like, oh my God.
Stuck through the box.
Right.
Yeah, I think the issue sometimes comes with, one, people don't. They'll be like, oh, it's just $8. Well, if you calculate that into, Tom ships 250 knives a day, that's a lot of money, But you also get like these guys that probably buy and sell, it's more of a negotiating type of situation where they're like, well, I'll toss in some shipping or whatever. Well, when you're buying from a maker, this isn't a negotiating type situation. It's just business. Right. So it's not like we're trying to do someone a solid. We're trying to make money to pay for bills. It's
yep.
It's not even make money. I don't try to make money on shipping. I try to meet expenses.
He's saying not carve it out of your profit of the item.
Yeah, I'm saying
exactly.
When it's all you do, you got to make money.
Right. You got to, that stuff gets calculated in, and like Tom said, you pay for it one way or the other. And That's the honest reality, right? It's like, if someone's figured what they actually need to get for an item, someone who actually made something, and they know what they need to get for the item, then they either have already calculated in shipping, handling, packing material, and otherwise, or they haven't. And if they haven't, they're giving you the number that it takes to do it. And it's not like that's not a surprise, right? Like when you post stuff in your group, Tom, it says right in it what the cost is. So when people come back and bug you about it, then who's nickel and diamond who, right? It's
anymore in our group, it's all free shipping in the CONUS. I'm being for real. I mean, we're doing that.
Air quotes free.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But you have to. You don't have to, but it's amazing how much of a difference that makes, right? That people are fine with it.
Yeah, I mean it's all perception. So
yeah.
That's an interesting one.
All right. Next thing on the list is another is this a Birch soapbox item? It might be, I don't know.
It's just it's called Where I Go Hypocritical.
Yeah, I don't know that we're actually
busting
any myths here. We're gonna have to rename this the soapbox episode.
Birch bitching. The whole Timberline thing. Yeah, it used to bother me a whole lot back in the day when I was really getting into it. People refer to it as the line, the hamon. They call it the temper line, even though it has nothing to do with the temper. The temper does not create the line, but people call it that. I don't know where it came from, but it is sort of one of those things where it's just people know what it is, so you don't say anything about it. You just let it fester inside. But yeah, it's another misnomer. It's the temper line is just what it's called, but it's not really what it is.
So
that's it.
What is it? I mean, okay, so maybe educate me. I don't know on this. Probably I know to call it a hamon, but I always thought temper line was okay too. But
the temper didn't create the line, so why call it a temper line?
Well, is that not the line where that kind of delineates where the hardness is? So that would be,
yeah.
That's kind of what I understood it to. I mean,
it is, but
it happens when you harden it, not when you temper it, I guess.
Yeah, that's the only thing. It's just a little word that bothers me sometimes.
So words only matter some of the time for you?
Oh boy.
Let's just forget we didn't need to talk about it.
He's regretting adding this to the list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really backed myself in the corner on that one.
You did.
So basically, certain words make differences.
D2 sucks.
Oh, son of a gun.
Birch is upset by this because it competes with the time he wants to spend correcting people from Damascus to pattern welded.
It's actually called pattern welded.
I like that accent.
Yeah, that's my in a coffee shop telling somebody how it is.
That's you looking down your nose voice.
The temper line's actually not causing the temper.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, I never took it as it was caused during the temper. I just thought it was like, that's the line where the hardness stops. So
yeah, that's what it is. I never understood why people called it a temper line. That's it.
All right. Let's let you jump up on the box for the next one.
Oh yeah.
This one's going to be even more fun.
Yeah, let me clear my throat for this. Talking about spa versus warranty.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Okay. You get this thing where you see people be like, so and so wouldn't take my knife back to clean it. They do not stand by their product. That's me smacking my table.
Oh boy.
Bullshit. That's the difference between spa and warranty. Someone taking a knife back to clean it up to make it look brand new is not the same thing as somebody not standing behind their work. Warranty is mechanical issues. The spa, you feel that air quote hard?
Yeah.
The refurbishments is when someone cleans it up, where they take it and they say, ooh, I scratched it. Let me buff that scratch out. Let me do this, which takes a shitload of work if it's a very polished, clean, hand rub type of knife.
And if it's just the unfun part.
Yeah, I've got one where I've got to take the Zerk clip and clean it up. And that is no fun.
But I think spa work is like, it's an unrealistic expectation that some knife makers propagate as a selling feature. But then it's like other knife makers that don't do it are bad knife makers because they won't spa their work. And for me, what I usually see this is like, I've seen customers actually put pictures up where they're just beating the ever-loving snot out of a knife, and then they send it in to get it spa'd, and it's a lot of work, and you never charge enough because it's just, you feel wrong charging, hundreds of dollars for the work that you're doing. And then they sell it and they make max profit. So basically, the spa work really, if you love your knife maker, spa work is something you should almost not want because it severely limits the amount of new work that they can do.
Well, you see it a lot from like newer makers. They will say, I 100% stand by my stuff. I will send it in and stuff like that. And I went,
free spa, yeah.
Buddy, let's see this in a couple years. And inevitably, you see a post a couple years down the road where like, I can't do this free anymore. It's because you just get inundated with all these knives. And it was really bad some years ago, and like the secondary really was spiking. So I was getting so many requests for refurbishments, like, and I dislike that word very much, the spa. But I would just be getting 2 or 3 requests every 2 weeks to have something cleaned up. So
didn't your dad even try to send his in?
All he wanted it wasn't to work because he had so much crap packed into it.
I remember that is a well-loved and used birch.
The Hamon was just black, but he didn't care about that. He just wanted me to take it apart, blow out all the crap, and put it back together. But then you do it, like you said, and that's probably our fault that we didn't charge enough. And I've thought about going back to open it back up, but charging what I think it'd be worth it. Now, people aren't going to like what that number is, but then it'd be immediately for sale, and you're like, and you're trying to help somebody by being like, yeah, I'll clean that up for you, because you don't want your knife out there looking like dog shit. It's got your name on it.
Then they make thousands of dollars, and you went in the hole for it.
And that's where it was, and that was my fault because I wasn't charging enough for it. But at the same time, so I ended up just closing them down, and I got a lot of backlash from customers, but a lot of makers that were very like, oh yeah, kick ass sort of thing. It was a strange thing.
Well, I'm all about using your stuff, but own that. If you're going to go out and pound it through a concrete block, don't send it back in for me to make it brand new, because I can't make money. That goes back to the same, hey, will you change out my scales? Will you put new handles on this knife? It's like all that cuts into me making new product.
Yeah. It's not lucrative, and this isn't, and it gets very mixed up because a lot of our customers are also friends of ours. And that's where the community kind of they have a hard time separating friendship with business, because we are friends with a lot of people, but we also are in business to make money for our families. So if you really do want to support us and do the things that we talk about, then be cognizant of how you're treating your knives and how you're treating your knife makers.
Well, and I think Mark could have a really good view on this, because the car industry is, let's use it as an analogy. If you get a vet and you go drive the hell out of it and put 200,000 miles on it, you can't send it back into GM and say, hey, make this like new again and get a new vet and then go sell it for a new vet price. I mean, that just won't ever work. That won't fly. And it's another unrealistic expectation that the industry has developed for knife makers who oftentimes are one-man shops doing this stuff, and it's a labor of love. We just aren't making money on the spa work, and it's warranty work. Yeah, function, I'll work on that all day, but it's like taking the scratches out and refinishing stuff. It just sucks the love of life out of me.
Yeah. I got to where I hated looking at them. I'd see them on my bench, and then I would put them up, and then I'd feel bad that it took so long and then not charge. And it was
the same thing.
It was just a cycle that was not healthy for anyone.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah, people absolutely wanted it because you guys would do it, right? I mean, this is ask me how I know kind of topic from Birch, right? Because he did it for a long time, and you know, it was a courtesy to customers that got out of control, and you know, unlike some products that were used as examples, these were items that were selling for 4, 5, 6, 10 times as much as what they sold for new. Right. Down the road. And so it's a combination of things that I think got it there. And there's a pretty good running history of people doing that. So it created this expectation that people would continue to do it. And, you know, I think Michael had to draw a line for his business, and that makes sense. And some people didn't like it, but it is what it is. And yeah, I think it goes back to the point that Michael was trying to make when he started this, which is it a surprise that people want their knife refreshed? No, not at all, right? Especially one that maybe they paid thousands and thousands of dollars for. Should they expect that for free? No, they should not. And maybe it's just not even something that's available to them. And it has nothing to do with not standing by your work in the form of making sure that your knife is functional, right? These things, in almost every case, are cosmetic things, not functional things.
Yeah. I just... The cost for that, it should be disproportionate to the amount of work, like much greater than the time and effort, because it's one of those things that we really dislike doing. And so oftentimes we charge less than it, much less than we normally would, when we should be charging much more proportionately. Like, the whole reason there's a spa thing is because somebody's making money. And if it's not the knife maker getting a little bit of that, then something's wrong.
Yeah. Well, my issue, I used to do a ton of Hamones, and part of the reason I don't do them anymore is because, I mean, I still do them, but not as much as I used to, is people just don't know how to treat them. So not only were they like that, they wanted me to clean something up, but it would be, you have to completely break down the whole knife and re-sand down the blade down past the logo, re-etch it, re-logo, redo everything. And it was an absolute ass whip. And I did it over and over and over. And then just seeing it just immediately go back to, and I would get, and this is my fault for falling for that type of stuff, this bro type of thing of, hey man, just help me out, you know, just please, you know, I've been a customer, blah, blah. Okay, I'll take care of you and stuff like that. I just got bitten way too many times. Which sucks because I don't want to ever be bitter or cynical or anything like that. But sometimes
too late.
It got too much.
Just saying, too late.
No, it got beat out of me a few times.
Yep. Okay. Next one we had on our list was one Tom wanted to talk about. This is a classic one. I actually learned this one the hard way a long time ago before I ever found any of the forum stuff.
Yeah.
This one's about stainless steel. And what does stainless steel exactly mean? Go for it, Tom.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's another unrealistic expectation that stainless steel won't rust. There are some steels coming out now that are much less likely to rust, but stainless steel just means that it will stain less.
It's almost like it's in the name.
Yeah, right. But I mean, it's like, if it's a carbon steel and you have oxygen and it's going to rust. I mean, stainless steel just basically rusts on it oxides on a very surface, and it makes a protective coating. But stainless steel will rust. I can promise you that. And especially think about what we're cutting, or like if we live in the South and it's humid. I've got a stainless Dan Wesson, and the part that I carried this gun a lot, and the part that's up against me, it's got rust on it. You know, I mean, that's a fact of the South. And if you skin a deer and put your knife up with blood on it, blood is extremely caustic. It doesn't matter if it's 440C, it's going to rust, you know?
Right.
So that's one of the things that kind of bums me out sometimes on people's expectations on stainless steels. And the thing is, it's like, if it's a user knife, it doesn't have to look bright and shiny. And in fact, I got in big trouble for this when I worked for Bob Dozier back in the day. A customer came in, he had a knife, it had a beautiful patina on it, carbon steel, and he wanted it sharpened. And he went in and was talking to Bob, and I was like, I'm going to do this guy a solid. And I totally cleaned it up, took all the patina off. It looked brand new. That dude about kicked my butt, man. I'm not kidding, because that patina helps protect the knife, you know? So yeah, I tend to not worry too much about that stuff. I don't like overt rust on my knives, but if it's starting to patina and get color, I know that that's a protective layer that's developing. And it's, if you use your knives, they're going to patina, they're going to show wear, you know, embrace that, I think, and just use them, and they're tools. But know that stainless steels will rust. Some of the new nitrogen steels won't, or much less likely.
What about surgical stainless steel, Tom?
Whoa, hey.
Well, that's only for surgeries, so people shouldn't be using that already.
That was a big deal in like the early 90s, late 80s.
Oh, yeah, it was. Late 80s, man. If it had surgical steel, you knew it was quality.
Straight up marketing.
But, I mean, case in point, or, you know, to Tom's point, you only need 10% chromium for something to be classified as stainless.
I think it's 13.
I think it's 10, Tom.
Ah, son of a gun.
Here we go.
Was that right?
No, I think it is 13.
Shit. Either way.
I think it's 13 because D2 is actually, depending on the melt, is around 11 to 12, 13% chromium, and it's just south of being stainless.
Yeah. So as far as like performance, chromium does jack shit for performance.
And honestly, that 13% that we were given as a rule of thumb is actually not correct either, because it depends on what other alloying elements are there. Because like 3V actually has less chromium than D2, but due to the way that it's in solution, it actually has more corrosion resistance than D2 from what I'm reading.
Because of manganese or some shit?
Yeah, there's some. I'm still learning this, and that's what's funny. You know, that was a myth that 13%, it's stainless, boom. But it has to do with the alloying elements and how much carbon is there, because carbon does weird things when there's excess. Depending on what other alloying elements are, you start getting some chromium carbides and vanadium carbides, and that's what helps with some of this wear resistance.
I'm talking about just like metallurgy classification. I'm not talking about what actually makes something more stainless. I'm talking about
correct
where they're 13. Okay,
I think it's 13. But
Tom, would you flipping a knife open, was that some kind of point of emphasis? Did you happen to flip open a 13% stainless knife?
No, that was my pin. I was kind of ranting and I flipped the pin. So sorry. I thought it was back down. I put it down.
I thought it was a virtual exclamation point of some kind.
It felt like it, but as soon as I did it, I was like, "Oh crap, Mark's going to be upset at me." Stop. I put it down.
Oh man, Mark's going to yell at me again.
Fucking Mark.
I found this. Yeah. A good way to summarize it is to say not all stainless is equally stainless.
Oh yeah.
Meaning free from ability to corrode, and maybe free is absolutely the wrong word to use. I learned this the hard way. I had many years ago, I'm going to say early mid 90s. I don't remember exactly. I looked it up when we did the bio episodes at the beginning of the podcast once upon a time, but I had this Benchmade CQC7. So our Ernie Emerson designed CQC7 made by Benchmade. It was ATS-34 with a blasted blade.
Ooh.
And ATS-34 is officially stainless, but definitely not the most corrosion resistant stainless. I had no idea about that. And that blasted finish, I think, tends to want to keep moisture and other shit. And so I bought this knife. It was stainless. I'm like, hey, I'm good to go. And
surface finish. I
used it and carried it all the time. And I don't remember what happened. I took it somewhere. I went on vacation or took it camping, something crazy. And you know, it's hot. It's the summertime. It's super humid. I'm using the thing, and I got home from my trip and opened it, and I was like, "What the fuck?" It was notably rusty, and I'm like, "What the hell happened? This is supposed to be stainless." And I freaked out. I'm like, "What what's the deal? And so I went,
Amy!
this is in the pre-Amy era, I think, actually. And so, yeah, I had to go read about it a little bit, and I'm like, son of a bitch. Somehow my stainless knife managed to rust. And, yeah, combination of factors, right?
Well, and it's interesting that you say that it was blasted, because surface prep is so important on performance. It's like in the tactical knife industry, we love the blasted blades, but it definitely makes them higher maintenance.
Yeah.
Which seems counterintuitive for a tactical knife.
You're making all these little tiny pockets for water to stay in. Tiny little micro pockets. That's what a blasted finish is.
Well, and that's, I use D2, which is technically not stainless. It's not stainless, but the satin finish that I put on it is calculated.
Smeared.
Oh.
It's a smeared finish. It actually closes the pores and it makes it much more corrosion resistant.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not just about making it a shinier knife. It's actually, that's why I take it to a 400 grit finish, and then I buff the bevels, because it really does. It smears it. And you can test this if you're out there in the knife world making knives. Put water on a 400 grit blade that's not buffed. It just spreads out. After I buff it, the water beads up. It's all about performance. I put a lot of thought into the surface finishes. Will I do the other finishes? Yeah, sure, but I don't think they're as good.
That's why a lot of the early blades were polished. It wasn't just because it looked pretty. It was to smear the steel, and to keep it, close the pores and allow you to have a less rusty type of knife. There's a reason for a lot of that stuff.
Well, I don't really offer a blasted finish or a blasted tumbled finish. If I do it, I do an acid wash finish, which helps put that protective patina on it, so it's there's a lot of thought that goes into this that maybe customers don't appreciate.
Tom is also a three-legged stool. Don't know what that means.
Thanks, Michael. I totally understand that reference.
Oh, all I could think when Tom was saying that was the Pee Wee Herman, I meant to do that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, geez.
Okay. Not all stainless is equally stainless, and it doesn't mean that it can't rust given the right set of conditions.
Dude, this next one, another good one, that forging misconception, Michael.
Now, hopefully this one isn't still around. This is a quick and easy. Used to be the idea that forging was better because you were hammering more material into the edge. They called it edge packing. And
you're making those molecules tighter.
Yeah, like you were fitting more steel into the steel between the steel. It doesn't work that way. You just move it around. That's all it is. But man, that was a real myth that went around for quite a while.
Well, and I think there actually is some performance gains from doing that, but it's not because of the reasons they said. I think it came from reheating and normalizing over and over. From what I understand, right?
That's what came out of it. It wasn't the idea that they were packing. It was the fact, they were reheating. They were shifting the steel in so many ways that it was making a better steel from doing that. But it wasn't because they were hamming the edge into a harder steel. It was just the fact that they were doing more cycles.
Yeah, they basically didn't have the science to figure that out, and they knew something was happening, and this is what they formulated. In science, we call that a hypothesis, and it was disproven.
Oh boy. Spoken like a couple of real stock removal tool bags.
Mm-hmm.
What?
I'm just teasing.
But
that's line number one of the hate mail that I'm going to get.
This might be the only myth that we actually there was a real Mythbuster one in there. The rest are just rants.
Right.
Well, and I love Kevin Cashin. He's got that dude is not messing around. He's got like 2 electron microscopes now, and I think it's kind of cool that he brought a lot of legit
science,
high-tech science into our industry. So big fan of what he's doing. I mean, how many knife makers have a microscope, period, much less 2 freaking electron microscopes?
Yeah, it's read all his stuff. Anything you can find online for Kevin Cashin if you really care about mainly carbon steel stuff
And science.
Yeah, and how, because he was bringing where, like we were talking about the early days of Damascus and stuff like that, it was very mythical and very, point yourself north to get a better, there was a lot of that crap that was going around. And we make fun of it now, but people legitimately thought that you had to do certain things to make for a better steel that were very witch's brew and Newt's eyes of Newt's type of stuff.
Yep. And it's been that way all through history up until just recently.
Mm-hmm. But he put a lot of great information out there. And if you ever get a chance, you probably have this, the Steel Metallurgy for the Non-Metallurgist book, the John Verhoeven.
No, I
Do you
don't.
have? Oh, it's great.
You'll have to send me a link. I'd love to get that.
Okay. It's a great book for information. Science.
I'm all about it.
Another real deal Michigan guy. Just saying.
Is it really?
Yep.
Yeah,
I didn't.
for real. And he is an epically talented guy.
Yep. Kevin was at a little get together
Oh.
thing that Phil Booth had at his house
Sorry, talking
a
about-
while back.
Verhoeven. I was like, how the hell did you know that?
No, I was talking about Kevin Cashin.
Kevin Cashin.
I gotcha.
All right. Next one was the last one that Jerry sent over to us, and that is about design elements. And we've talked about this a little bit in previous episodes, right? About how it's kind of different in the technical world than it is or was or maybe still is in the traditional world, about ownership of design elements and ownership. I'm throwing huge air quotes around that, but design features or design elements and whether or not it needs to be patented to be respected in the industry. And there's certainly a bunch of different versions of that story. But the myth form that Jerry stated as is you must have a patent to lay claim to a design element. And while that may probably technically be true, it certainly isn't true in function or in the way this thing tends to work, right?
I feel a rant spooling up.
Uh-oh. I can feel it deep down inside.
Well, that's why
Let
they
her
call
rip.
it intellectual property. When someone makes something that they have designed and made it, then let them have it. Just because someone doesn't have a patent on it or some sort of legal hold on it doesn't mean it's not. Doesn't mean that it's right to take it. We get this idea that you have to have a legal grab for it to be fair or not be fair game, which is kind of bullshit. We like to call this a community. Treat it like a community and start being nice to each other. And that means not stealing someone else's shit. And I get it. There's a ton of design features and only so many ways to make a knife and all this shit and blah, 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 blah. But there's a set of parameters that aren't too hard to stick with. If it looks a lot like someone else's, just don't do it. It's being done.
Talk to him.
Or ask them.
Because a lot of times it's like, if you take somebody's stuff, they're going to be upset at you. But if you ask them and they give it to you, hey, everybody's happy. Or maybe they say, hey, I'd rather you didn't. Then there's no hurt feelings with the communication.
Absolutely. I put little a couple little wheels. I call them Heelys, which is really dumb to call that, on some clips because I didn't want titanium smashing down against mother of pearl.
Yeah, they look great.
Thanks. But it's just like a little carbon fiber. But so I looked and tried to find who did it first, and it looked like Walker was the first that I could find to put a little wheel on it. So I asked him, and he says, "Go ahead, have at it." It's that easy.
Right.
But just by asking, you're showing him respect. And guess what? He's probably more likely to help you or talk to you or be your buddy in the future. Really.
And I've had people ask me that to me, I've been like, that looks nothing like one of mine. Have at it.
Yep.
Or sometimes it's been similar, but it's like, oh, I don't give a shit.
But you respect when people ask, right? I mean, I do.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Well, in other cases where something was really close and you saw it and reached out to someone and said, hey, pump the brakes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's a good one.
We've talked about that before in previous episodes. It seems like it really gets down to respect, mutual respect between makers, and actually paying attention to whether or not you're close to somebody else's stuff, right? Brian talked about that when we interviewed Brian Efros. And like Tom said, all comes down to communication. Have a conversation if you think there's something there, or and that should happen on either side, I guess. But if you design something, it makes sense to reach out and talk to people. And if the person says no, that should be something that you respect, not demanding legal paperwork or some other bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you value that relationship anyways, if you ask and they say, I'd rather you didn't, and you do it anyways, well, let's just consider that bridge burned.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, for sure.
Don't be surprised if they out you in the community either. Well, I'm just saying.
All right, Tom, you're a little spiteful this morning.
Yeah. Full of it.
No, I'm being straight up honest.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
I mean,
I'm going to start smearing all my blades, too.
dude, go for it. It's better than that hand rubbing bullshit. I hate doing that stuff. That stuff, hurts my soul, man.
It's fantastic when it's done.
That is true.
Okay. Michael, you have another obscure one. Is this one that you're going to regret bringing up? Should we skip it?
No, this is just
Okay,
straight
okay.
up just old school, weird factoid myth thing. Another goes back to, if you read like a bunch of old forums, stuff like that, heat treating simple tools or simple steels, 1095, 1075, shit like that. A lot of times you'll see, okay, heated up to non-magnetic and then quench. That's the austenizing point, stuff like that. Well, it's actually not. That's called the Curry point, which occurs at 1414 Fahrenheit. And that's when steel actually becomes non-magnetic. So you actually need to heat it up just a little bit more to get it past that. And that's where I'm always, when people talk about or ask me how to do stuff, the first thing I say is like, go get yourself a pyrometer, a thermocouple, a high heat thermometer. And make sure you know exactly where your temps are, because there's no reason to go by these old standards of doing things. You don't have to judge by the wave that goes through the steel or a certain color chart. We have pretty cheap science to get you exactly where you want to be to get the most out of your steel. So that's just a fun little myth buster I like, that non-magnetic is not your critical point or your austenization point. It's actually the Curry point.
Okay, question.
Yes.
Just to clarify. So you're saying that the point we're looking for is a Curry point, right?
No. No, we want to get it to where you have your phase shift, and that is past the Curry point for what we want.
So the Curry point is where it goes non-magnetic.
Yes.
Okay, and
But
you're saying
it's very close. It's so close that I think it got misconstrued, but no one ever calls it the Curry point, which to me is just kind of, it's interesting. That's just
okay. So it's actually past that a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's
is weird. It's very strange though, because you'll see like some websites, some places will call your critical point, the non-knife maker website's critical point of 1095, and very closely your other 10x stuff at 1350. But you don't do that. Do not go at 1350. You'll not be happy with the result.
Right. And it's interesting because I've read some of the metallurgical stuff on that, and like 1095 is weird. It's like you've got 1350 to like 1560 or something as the temperatures, right?
Uh-huh.
And I tried starting at those lower temperature points, and I was not happy with the results.
No, Kevin Cashin, actually, going back to him, he has always recommended his to go to 1475, which I never usually go that hot. And it's interesting. Truthfully, most makers I see just using a forge and starting out will actually overheat their steel. because the 1450 is, say you're trying to hit that, is a lot lower in a forge than you think it is. You'll see some pretty hot forging, but like it got cherry red and blah blah.
Cherry red's hot as hell.
It is, but let's just use science, man. It goes back to that. We have the means.
I like it. That's good information. I learned quite a bit this time also.
So I'm a man of science. What can I say?
Well, seriously, I've only forged a couple knives, so I don't have a lot of forging knowledge. I've got some book knowledge and I've got some heat treat knowledge, but sometimes, that's not where I spend my time. So
No, I dove so deep into Hamon, and stuff like that I wanted to read as much as I could about it. And that's another thing that kind of gets me, where someone's like, hey, can I use this junkyard steel to make whatever? Sure, you could, but cheap. 1095 is cheap. 01 is cheap. Get you a bar, use quantifiable data points and do it. Let's not toss a bunch of unknowns into it.
Yeah, I've never understood that. Or can I use this mix of candle wax and motor oil and mineral oil and used peanut oil?
Yeah,
to quench it.
But to be fair, Parks 50 used to be very, very hard to get a hold of.
Right.
You used to have to, buy bunches and get lucky and get it from so-and-so. So it was tough to find real good, or AAA, same company that made that. It was hard to find those.
I think I've got two different setups. I've got Parks 50 in one, and I've got a Brownells in another one. So for different stuff. But,
nice. It wasn't supposed to be, but it sure smells like calling Damascus pattern welded.
It's more the point of, hey, this is that's got a different name.
Yes.
Well, it's like I said, words have meaning.
But Tom, they're all made up.
Oh boy.
I know.
Well, we had a late write-in, hot off the ticker tape.
Oh.
From Jerry. One last myth.
Beep, 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 beep,
There it
beep,
is. Small folders take less time to make than big folders.
Well, just knives, period.
Yeah, good point. Call it knives, not just folders.
Small knives are harder to make, I think. Your tolerances are, there's that word. But everything's so much smaller and tighter, and I'm telling you, a small blade is tough to grind because stuff happens fast.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to, when you're a kid, try to pack your sleeping bag back into the bag when you're...
That it came in?
Those old school, really puffy ass sons of bitches. That's what making a small folder's like. It doesn't feel like it wants to fit in that son of bitchin' package. But you got to make it. And it's tough sometimes. You got to change angles. You got to change lock geometry. You got to...
Harder to hold them, to work on them. And
shorter lock bars, there's a lot of variables that will change. So it's not easier.
Yeah. But we have to charge less because of the perception.
The grinding's actually harder for me.
I think it's way harder, dude.
And you're like, so you just get started and you're like, oh, I'm at the tip. Shit. Plunge tip. And I'm there.
And yeah. Well, yeah, because it doesn't even hang off the side of the wheel.
No, you're trying to form your plunge and still yet not hit the tip and roll it all off. It's a weird one to grind.
I think I think the perception from customers is that little knives should be cheaper because they must be easier to make, right? That's where that comes from, I'm sure.
And less materials.
Yeah, right. But then, I don't know. I think when I think when Michael transitioned from hold it up in front of your face and say, oh, this knife looks like it should cost about, for pricing, to something that had a little more structure to it, I think you fixed that problem, didn't you, Michael?
I did.
The little knives are no longer cheaper.
They're a little less because of the cost of material, but
materials cost so little of the whole thing.
Yeah, that's it. Except if you're doing but you feel bad. I still feel badly when I've done like a full Mocha Taiwan or whatever, and be like, ugh, I got to charge this much for a tiny little folder, but hell, man, it took just as much time.
Right.
And more skill.
Mm-hmm. Sure as shit took a lot more design time to make sure that the detent ball didn't ride outside of that thing and all that crap.
Lots of stuff to pack in a tiny space.
Sleeping bag, man.
That was a great example.
Thank you, Tom.
You have a beautiful mind.
Oh, boy. Okay. That's it for rants and myth busting. I'm using air quotes around myth busting now. But good conversation, maybe some things to talk about. We're guaranteed to hear some stuff from our listeners telling us either thank you for talking about this or what a colossal bunch of douchebags you guys are. And everywhere in between, I'm quite sure about it.
I just want to see a bunch of pictures of that little meme guy going, actually.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's
Mark
coming.
the Maker be like, actually.
Exactly. Yeah, or Michael Birch specifically, hopefully.
This is going to be a good one.
Yeah. So we'll see. I got to find some time to get it edited between travel and TKI and everything else going on. So we'll see if we can get this one out hopefully sometime soon. We do have, we've talked about before, we ordered up these challenge coins. We've had them for a while. Tom was able to get some marked for us for some special folks. We're going to get those out. And then very soon we are going to have a release of these challenge coins. And I know people have been anxiously awaiting them. So watch the website and the Facebook group and probably our Instagram as well for information on when those become available. They came out really, really cool. They look great in person. Tom, you got to see them. You like them, right?
Oh yeah, they're really good. And I read between the lines there, Mark.
What's that?
Tom finally got off his ass.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a myth.
I did get it done.
Tom did a very nice job. Tom and his crew, I should put it that way.
Yeah, Zach actually ran the laser, so child labor.
Zach did a fine job. High five, Zach.
Yeah.
They look awesome. So we'll get those out to folks shortly, so watch for that. And as always, thanks for everyone who listens along with us. We have a very loyal crew that kind of follows us and gives us feedback and talks to us about the show, as well as a very strong base of Patreon supporters who help us keep this thing ticking along. So we appreciate all you guys. The Patreon folks are super, super helpful.
Yeah, we really do appreciate it, guys, because we're not getting rich off this, and we actually don't really even use that money. Like, it doesn't go into our pockets. It goes for equipment and website, all that kind of stuff, you know.
There's a lot more that goes into it than people realize, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say this. The Patreon people, that are better than all y'all.
Oh, come on.
They're just better people.
Oh, don't be like that.
No, they're not, but we really appreciate it.
They're very generous and nice. We appreciate them. Okay.
Trying to guilt them into Patreon.
Stop it. From the guy that wasn't even wanting to do Patreon in the first place. Listen to that.
That's true.
He has come way around.
No, I just really, truly appreciate people that for someone, I listen to a ton of podcasts, so I truly appreciate the folks that put money into this. So
thanks, guys.
It really helps us not have to take so much out of our own pockets, which, as we covered before, we're knife makers. We're not rich.
Sure you're not, pal.
Hiding them dollar bills.
I seen you with that big wad of cash at a show. Come on.
Yep. You go home and it's crazy. That stuff just disappears. Like,
funny
no
how that
joke.
works, isn't it? Yeah.
Wow. Painful.
Yeah. All right, folks. Thanks for listening along with us. We appreciate y'all, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks, all.
Thanks, guys.
To learn more about our makers, you can find Tom Crine on the web at crineknives.net, in his Facebook group, Crine Knives, or in his Instagram account, @CrineKnives. For Michael Birch, check birchtreeblades.com, Facebook group Birch Tree Blade Works, or Michael's Instagram @BirchTreeBlades. For myself and the Raygun Bead Project, we're on the web at raygundivision.com. We have a Facebook group called Raygun Division, or my personal Instagram @msteiner. For those interested in photos, references from the show, or some discussion about the show itself, you can find us on the web at markofthemaker.com, in a Facebook group called Mark of the Maker, or on our Instagram @markofthemaker. Last but not least, the ultra cool and haunting background music we use for the show is a piece called Noir Guitar by Stevie's Amp Shack, found at the Free Music Archive and licensed under Creative Commons CC BY 4.0. Thanks for listening.